Quick welcome if you're new here. This is 5 Random Questions. If you enjoy this episode, hit follow so you don't miss the next one.
It's like, but why didn't you already know your neighbors? Right? Why did you not already know your neighbors? Like, please be honest about that. And then while at the same time, it's like we have this loneliness epidemic. Talk to your neighbors, talk to the people around you, put the phones down. You know what I mean?
Hi, and welcome to 5 Random Questions, the show with unexpected questions and unfiltered answers. I'm your host, Danny Brown, and each week I'll be asking my guests 5 questions created by a random question generator. The guest has no idea what the questions are, and neither do I, which means this could go either way. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into this week's episode. Today's guest is Emily Williams. Emily is a Webby, Signal, and Anthem award-winning podcast host and former executive director of the Arcus Center for Social Justice Leadership. A gender studies scholar and global advocate for social justice, Emily has worked with communities in more than 20 countries and co-founded the Social Justice Initiative at the University of Illinois at Chicago. Her work includes contributing to a global treaty adopted by the United Nations and decades of leadership in advancing equity, gender justice, and human rights in the US and beyond. So Emily, welcome to 5 Random Questions.
Thank you, Danny. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. And just going over your bio there in the introduction, it's an incredibly impressive list of achievements. And reading on your website, you previously worked, a normal sort of 9-to-5 job, but you mentioned it's like a really stifling and unhealthy environment until you left and started to forge your own path. So I'm curious, was that the push that led you to where you are today? Was it like the environment that put you on that path, or part of what you campaigned for now?
Interesting. Thank you. And thank you, Danny. I'm really excited to be here. I would say it's not that that position in particular that's gotten me to this path. I have noticed while being on this path that women of color experience a lot of hostility and aggression in the workplace. And there's plenty of research to support this, that women of color and Black women in particular are the most harassed group in the workplace. And so it's an area that is not often focused on. And because I am someone who has a very strong sense of justice, someone who has a lot of experience advocating for justice, I also know that then means that I need to advocate for justice in the workplace for myself and for others.
And I'd imagine, I don't live in the US, and I'm of the stereotypical, very privileged position of being a middle-aged white guy. I would imagine with changes at the government level, so different, leaders come in. So obviously you have Democrat, Republican, Democrat, etc., and different leadership approaches, if you like. How does that impact your work and what you're doing when you've got swing from up here to down here and all the things in between?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Who's in office matters a lot for the work that I do. When we have someone who is really promoting, policies that make life more livable for people, that, honor the integrity of all human lives, right? My work is much easier. When we have an administration who is hostile to other human beings and who seeks to sow division and creates harmful policies, makes my life, my work a lot more difficult. And, that's a problem because, number one, I think we're seeing that the majority of Americans do not want these kinds of hostile, harmful policies that we're seeing more of right now. And actually, the policies around or the emphasis on diversity, equity, and inclusion, respecting human rights, ending war, those policies, have been quite popular, actually. And we see that now even with the election of Zoran Mamdani and, across the country where elected officials are trying to have these policies that represent a people first mentality and a profit sometime later mentality, right? Which we also have seen here in Chicago just recently with the city budget and the mayor, wanting to tax the largest corporations so that we could have more funds to support the people who live in Chicago.
It is interesting. I'm not very well versed. I should say not averse. That's the wrong word. Completely not very well versed in politics and policies, etc. My friend in Toronto, Sam, really well. He studied it for years as well, and it's always interesting to look at how different countries and governments, etc., approach things. I know one of the big things here in Canada, not to get too political, because I do try to keep away from that on the show, but one of the big things here in Canada is UBI, Universal Basic Income. And do you feel that's something that maybe the US and other countries that haven't adopted it may be thinking more of now as, the world changes, I guess?
I don't know that governments are thinking about that so much, but I know that activists are. And especially as we see, kind of this rise of artificial intelligence and, the predictions that AI is going to take over, so many jobs in the next, 1 to 3 years. Well, then the question remains, if, a large sector of society is going to get pushed out of the workforce, how will they then meet their basic needs if they're not able to work for wages, right? So that then pushes us into this conversation about universal basic income. And here in Chicago, some places in Michigan and elsewhere in the US, there are some really interesting pilot programs around basic income. And it's not surprising to someone like me, and probably not to you either, Danny, but they work really well, right? Imagine that, a family, who was previously low income can depend on having even $500 to $1,000 a month, and that they can actually plan to meet the needs of their family, right? So I think that, along as AI continues to rapidly advance, I think that societies are going to be pushed into this conversation around universal basic income.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to watch. I know when the lockdown happened, the pandemic was in its prime, for want of a better word, the Canadian government gave an amount of X amount of $1,000 per month to people that needed it, because to top up income, etc. And that made a huge difference. That kept so many families afloat and so many houses not going under the hammer for auction, etc. So I feel that there needs to be something like that for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's just another form of stimulus, right? Of stimulating the economy, of bolstering the economy, really. So we can start, this goes back to the people first policies. I think, Danny, honestly, I mean, I'm an optimist. I'm also a realist. I think it's only a matter of time before we're seeing many more of these kinds of policies that are much more humane, that are actually supporting people, at least here in the US. And I know that our policies aren't isolated to, the landmass of the United States. I think we have at least a tough year, a few more tough months. But after that, I think we're going to see much more humane, much more just policies and approaches to governing.
Well, fingers crossed. I will.
Yeah.
I'm 100% with you on that. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
I'm crossing toes as hell. But I know we shall get you. Not we. I'm not a royal we. I shall definitely get you back in the show. We'll have a look at. Let's revisit this in say 2-3 years time and see how things panned out.
Yeah.
In the meantime, though, I'm gonna switch lanes and bring you into the 5 random questions hot seat. Are you ready for this, Emily?
I'm ready.
All righty. Let's bring up the random question generator. Okay. I like this as a one to start, actually, with giving your background, actually. So, Emily, question number 1. Do you believe people are inherently good?
This might be controversial, Danny, but I do not. I do not believe people are inherently good. No. I believe that there are some people who are good and great and super well-intentioned, and I believe that there are some people who are not well-intentioned. In fact, they're very malicious and have bad intent. I believe that. I mean, I think, I got asked a question similar to this in an interview a few months back, but it's hard to believe that, for instance, what we're seeing play out here in the US, that, we could cause so much harm, and to believe that the people who are doing this repeatedly, time and time again, are inherently good. And so I don't think, I said earlier I'm an optimist, but I'm also a realist. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, right? I think it is okay. I think we have to actually be able to prepare ourselves to say, there are some people who have really bad intentions. And we need to know that so that we can navigate this life in a realistic way and in a healthy way. Because I think when we believe that everyone is good, then people aren't held accountable. I think that's sometimes where we see things like toxic positivity having a really negative impact, right? It's like, no, some people are not good. Some things are really harmful. There are some really negative things in the world, and we have to be able to address them so that we can come up with solutions, right?
It's interesting. As we record this on Thursday, January 8th, the latest episode just dropped earlier today. My guest on that, Rob Lynch, one of the questions he had was about, it was a similar kind of question, but it was around about being good and bad, and does toxicity and power, etc., come from if you have money early on, or you work hard and you come from poverty or not having a lot of money to start with, so you work hard and you understand empathy and what it takes to be a good person, show kindness, etc. Do you feel sometimes that, to your point, that inherently good is not in everyone? Do you think that sometimes comes from background of how being raised, and then what, obviously, was there money and power involved where you basically had anything you want, so you didn't really understand what it was like to be kind to others that were looking to help you, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting question. This notion that someone has early trauma, and then that impacts their behavior and the harm that they cause as an adult. How do we understand that, or how do we consider that when we consider a person's actions? And I do think absolutely, childhood trauma or adversity, I think that certainly has a lot to do with, or it certainly informs a person's behavior throughout their life and into adulthood. And people are at various stages of healing or not healing at any given time. And at the same time, it cannot excuse any harm that's done, right? So I think that we have to, create more spaces for people to heal, to normalize talking about these kinds of things, to normalize a healing process. I mean, really, it's only been in the last decade and a half that therapy has really become more in the mainstream, more normalized, right? And some people are just starting to dip their toe into that world, and some haven't, And so I think we also, and this is where, we want to talk about narcissists or sociopaths, all these things. Often there is a root cause of childhood trauma, right? But I think we also need to have, some really well-defined points of accountability, right? So Danny, here's this is one thing I'm thinking about, right? And we've all done things that, probably, maybe our younger selves wouldn't stand by now, or maybe we did things unintentionally that had a negative impact, right? And, when I think about what causes people to change, is it that someone was coddling you and said, I know that you're a great person, you didn't mean it, and, you had all these things? Or was it the times when you had to face consequences for that negative behavior? I mean, what causes change, right? And I would say that more often than not, it's the consequences that create change, right? And so, when we see some of these, very powerful, very wealthy people who are creating harm, even when they've had childhood trauma or childhood adversity, part of the reason why they continue to create that harm is because they don't have significant enough consequences, right, for their actions. So I do believe in compassion. I do believe in empathy. I also believe in accountability and consequences. And I believe in ending harm.
That's a really important point. I know there's a lot of talk, obviously, about, helicopter parenting. And it is my wife and I, we've got 2 kids, they're both teens now. And it was always hard to, how far do you go to protect, but also how far do you go to let them go on their own to understand, well, what you did was bad and this is why. And then also make sure that they learn, without pushing back. Because, as kids get older, the more a parent tells them to do one thing, they'll push back on that. So do you feel like not enough accountability happens at the family level and this is probably simplifying it, and I apologize to anybody, that feels that. I do apologize. Do you feel sometimes families, educators, etc., have more or should have more allowance to show accountability? Because sometimes, it's harder to discipline kids. Obviously, you don't want to strike kids or anything, but do you know what I'm trying to say? I feel like I'm struggling here. I don't want to simplify it.
No, I think I'm picking up what you're putting down. And one thing that I think it's a generational shift. I think about some of the ways that I was raised. Tough love was a thing. And it was a thing that we had rules, we had consequences. We had high standards and expectations for how we behaved and how we treated one another and ourselves. And, that extended to things like school, that extended to things like athletics or extracurriculars. And there's been a shift in that, I think it's gone too far in the other direction of we can't, ask kids to do things that they don't feel comfortable with, right? Whether or not it's good for them. One thing that I think about a lot in sports is that I played basketball for a very long time and we got yelled at, our coaches were tough on us. We were really good, we have a lot of character, but nowadays, you can't do that. You can't yell at kids, in athletics. I'm not arguing for yelling at kids or not in sports, but I think that there's an absence of, an ethic of learning from adversity, right? Navigating one's way through things and struggling a bit. Everything shouldn't be easy, right? And everything shouldn't also be about an individual's comfort level, right? Because then we see hyper individualization, right? Where's the collective values, right? Where's the community building? A lot of young people nowadays don't have those skills, right? It's very difficult for them to engage with a new person at the grocery store, right? These things are normal. We should be able to say hello, look a person in the eye at the grocery store, right? And also, going back to what I said earlier, people more often than not learn from consequences, right? As opposed to, well, let's just make everything easy, everything nice, you're lovable, I love you. All of that is, of course, but we also have to have the consequences. And I think, maybe we don't have to go to the extreme of sometimes tough love can be abused, but there's also something very real and useful about that notion of tough love of I love you. And so you need to develop, this character skill, right? I know it's uncomfortable for you to speak to people at the grocery store, but you're going to need to put your phone down, look people in the eye, say hello, say thank you, right? Hold the door open for someone. I think that we've gotten away from some of those kinds of niceties, maybe even is a problem, because now it's at least in the activist world, you hear so much about, well, we have to build community, build where you are. It's but why didn't you already know your neighbors? Right? Why did you not already know your neighbors? Please be honest about that. And then while at the same time, it's we have this loneliness epidemic. Talk to your neighbors, talk to the people around you, put the phones down. You know what I mean? Maybe it's a little awkward. That's okay, right? That's an experience too, So, going back to your question about, is the parenting, the helicopter parenting or we're not going to make them do anything kind of parenting is, I do think that I think we're doing our kids a disservice. I think that kids need consequences, they need structure, they need love, and they got to get outside of their comfort zone. And that often takes a nudge from parents and other supportive adults around them.
No, I'd say that's a great answer. And you more eloquently stated it than I was trying to say. So I thank you for that, Emily. So that was definitely an interesting one to open up proceedings with. Let's have a look at what question number 2 brings up.
Okay.
Question number 2, Emily. What was, as in past tense, what was your saddest moment?
Oh my God. Why? I feel like I'm getting serious questions. Danny, and I think I may feel really sad, right? I do feel sad about it right now, but my best friend disappeared from a yoga retreat in the summer 2024. And it was the kind of situation where from the first conversation with authorities, she was in the Bahamas. So the first conversation with authorities, it was automatically suspect, right? Things didn't sound right. And so myself and my friend's mother and a few other people, we went to the Bahamas and, we tried to figure out what was happening. And that ended up being a long process because, there was no real investigation. We weren't able to we're having a hard time getting people to do their jobs. Essentially, I'm not a police officer, but I know the basic things that you need to do in order to have an effective investigation, right? So, that's been the saddest moment without a doubt. And I'll say this too, is that Taylor was my best friend for about 16 years, and that spent about the majority of my adult life. And, for someone who's not married, who doesn't have children, my best friend was my person. Taylor was my person. Everything, every life milestone, from the big things to the small things, and so I miss her immensely. And it's also just remains a huge sense of injustice. Number one, it's why did that happen to my best friend? And then two, Taylor's Black and trans. And we are quite sure that, it was an act of violence rooted in anti-Blackness, rooted in transphobia, which led to her disappearance. And so that's another layer of, I guess I could say sadness is probably at the root of it, but it's also just a lot of anger. It's that's not right. Nobody should be treated that way, and trans people have a right to be who they are, just like we all do, and, despite so many efforts. And for me, someone like me, who's my entire career has been devoted to social justice, and so there's just another level of frustration and sadness. But that's without a doubt. I mean, I miss my best friend every day, and in some ways it's I still have these moments of is it real? Because, also when you have a bond with someone, when you're so close with someone, when they're your person, you feel them so deeply, right? The connection and the bond is so deep. And thank goodness that things like that don't go away, the connection and that bond, at least that doesn't go away. But I want my friend, I want her here with me. Yeah.
I'm really, truly sorry for that happening. And I can't even begin to imagine, what that would feel like and did feel like at the time as well. Was there ever any closure? Was there anything on the case that was closed, or is it still outstanding, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's still technically an open investigation, but they're not actively investigating her disappearance. The only thing, and I said this in the press conference, and it's all over social media, but the only reason why anything happened is because we pushed for it to happen, and thank goodness that media here in Chicago, in the US, and also some media in the Bahamas were really supportive to really push it forward and to raise awareness about what happened. And those kinds of things, made the authorities do something. But like I said, and I've said this from the very beginning, you can look at what the authorities said that they did and tell that they were not trying to find out what happened to Taylor. And so people know what happened. I believe that people who were at that yoga retreat, who are part of the authorities in the Bahamas, probably who are, somehow just part of street culture in the Bahamas, I think they know exactly. And so, my hope is that people will just come forward and say, listen, this is what happened. This is what we saw. I hope that at some point someone's brave enough to do that, and, yeah. So otherwise, no, we don't know. There hasn't been closure in terms of having the details of what actually happened.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hopefully, and I don't want this to sound glib 100%, hopefully, there will be some form of closure for you and Taylor's family and loved ones, because I like I said, I can't even begin to imagine what that must have been like. I'm really glad you got to spend 16 amazing years, by the sounds of it, with Taylor.
Yeah.
And obviously you've got fantastic memories to take forward of Taylor, so that, that's always something, like you say, when you have that bond, it's always nice to, have that, for the moments when you need it most, right?
Right. Yeah, that doesn't change, Yeah.
100%. Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm really, truly sorry for that, and sorry for that question popping up, but I appreciate your answering, Emily. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Let's look to switch things over. As you mentioned, that's kind of two serious kind of questions there.
I know, it's
for you.
Silly.
So let's have a look. This one, I like this one actually, because I'm a bit of a geek at heart. I love superheroes, etc.
Cool.
So Emily, question number 3. If you could choose, and this has been in an episode before, but I'm really curious about your superpower. So Emily, if you could choose to have any useless superpower, what would you pick?
Any useless superpower. What would I pick? Any useless superpower. I think honestly I would just like fly.
would you class that as useless though?
No, that's not useless. No, you're right. That's not useless.
I feel that'd be kind of cool. We like save on planes and stuff, and people on planes that you don't like.
Right. And just hang out in the air, in the sky. What would be an example of a useless superpower? Like being able to read people's minds?
I guess it depends how you're going to use it, right? But maybe if having like I don't know, I'm trying to think of the answer that my guest shared that time when this question popped up, but maybe something like you could be the world's strongest person, but you can't do anything unless you use your pinky or something.
Okay.
I mean, that's not the answer. That's an example. But yeah, I guess a useful superpower would be something that's just no fun to have. Like, you could be invisible, which is awesome, but then you could be like, I don't know, like invisible, but also you've got a very, very quiet voice so people can't hear you. Or you've got a real loud voice. Like, that's better. You have a real loud voice, and then people know you're there anyway.
Okay. Let me see about this. I think if I could have any useless superpower, I just sometimes I'm thinking about my dad here. I like to kind of say things to just get like a rise out of him, and then I like to just kind of like make a joke out of it, like real like youngest daughter stuff. I would like to do that, I would like to be able to maybe like help someone see something that they is maybe like an irritant for them or something. Maybe it's kind of irrational, but then just like not have to like have the consequences of it, be able to like see it play out, like that's what I love doing about like my father. Like I was home over the holidays, and he has like a very clean house and a very clean kitchen. And I made a joke that I warmed up some like lasagna in the microwave and it exploded. And he was like, popped up from the couch so quick, and it was my brother and I thought it was hilarious, and after that was like one of the early days that I was there. After that, he chilled out a little bit, he wasn't on everybody about, well, get your dishes done, clean the kitchen, all these things. And so I think if there's a way, if I could have a superpower of like helping people see like, this is where you're wound very tightly, but then not have them like be able to project it onto me. Well, it's because you did whatever. I think maybe that would be my superpower of like, you're wound really tightly right here. I'm going to like have the superpower of revealing it to you, but you're not going to be able to make it about me.
I do like that because it's still got kindness associated with it. Because originally, when you're trying to wind people up, it's it's trying to get, like you say, get a rise out of them, which could get them really frustrated and ruin their day, obviously.
Right.
But I do like that you sort of spin it back to where, even though you've not got accountability, shame on you from your previous answer, but no accountability on that one. But yeah, I like how it's like maybe even helping them understand, hey, you've got this where you're a little bit wound tightly up. This is how you can maybe, do you really need to be that way?
Right. Is it really serving you?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, I mean, it would suck. I've had stuff explode in a microwave before, and it sucks. You've got to clean it up, but it's not fun.
Yeah, right,
and
right.
then you can't eat it, or maybe you can. I don't know. It depends on the explosion.
We have to scrape it off the sides.
Yeah, exactly. But I wouldn't want that to ruin my day because someone else did it. Right. I understand it's his house and he wants it to be a certain way, etc.
Right.
And my guest on the first episode of this new season, Keisha TK Dutes, she was mentioning about her mom, who's from Jamaica, about, having, plastic on the sofa and everything. Sounds similar, like a generational thing again, going back to your generational comment there.
Right. And it's like, how can you respect with also like, but we want it to be just a little bit different, or like there's a different way maybe of doing it. Like, have you considered it, Well,
I like that. I think that classes more than classes as a useless superpower, but one that brings value, which is always a nice thing to have. So I like that one.
Okay.
This part is brought to you by someone awesome. We'll be back with more questions in a sec.
Martin here from Dad's Bedtime Stories, the podcast that takes your kids' wildest suggestions and turns them into bedtime adventures. Suggestions like,
I want a story for a robot summer camp where the robots battle.
Or,
I want a story about a unicorn named Rainbow Dash.
So if your kids want to fall asleep dreaming of wizards, dragons, planets full of living strawberries, or even a universe where kids battle with magical cards, then check it out. Dad's Bedtime Stories, available anywhere podcasts are distributed.
Hey there, Danny here. If you enjoy 5 Random Questions, I've started a short weekly newsletter called the 5RQ Companion. Each week, it's just a few things. One lingering question from the episode, one small behind-the-scenes moment, and one question just for you. It's free, thoughtful, and a nice way to keep the conversation going between episodes. You can find it at 5rqcompanion.com. And now, back to this week's episode. Let's have a look at what question number 4 brings up.
Okay,
I'm going to ask this because we were kind of chatting in the green room earlier before recording, Emily. So question number 4. Do you prefer to travel or stay close to home?
that's a really good question. It's tough because I'm like the kind of person, I travel a lot. And I would always notice that just before like a trip, I would like have this kind of like nerve and anxiety of like, oh, I just want to stay home. It's so comfy. I love it so much. I want to hang out with my friends here. And then when I would get out in the world or arrive at my destination, I would be like, I'm never going back, So that tension is real for me. But I think that I would prefer to travel. I mean, the world is so big, and there are so many beautiful places and people and things to see and experience and like learn from that I would say certainly I would rather travel. I live in Chicago and I love it so much. And there still are so many places that I want to see in the world, experience, people I want to connect with. And, what I also really love about travel is the anonymity of it. It's like, okay, I'm like over here somewhere else in the world where I've never been, no one knows me. And I find a real freedom in that. And then I also find like a real like heartwarming affirmation in the kinds of connections that we're able to make with people who we've never met, who we have zero familiarity with in terms of culture or society. And those are the kinds of experiences that really make me, feel like that are so valuable in life, and really drive me. They really actually drive my sense of justice, and my sense of community of like, we're all out here, we're all humans here trying to live our lives in like the best way that we can, and, yeah. So, and so when I, see things, decisions, policies, people who infringe upon that like basic aspect of humanity or that basic humanity, it's like, I just feel like we really feel so much urgency around trying to protect that, and not only protect it, but increase it for people.
It's interesting that you mentioned about the anonymity. Anonymity. Put my words correct there. And I'm just thinking back to your earlier answer about how, we don't speak to our neighbours or people in the grocery store, etc. But we'll easily speak to people, complete strangers, on a beach,
Right.
Hiking up a mountain or whatever. I guess you've got to speak to people hiking up a mountain. It's a bit more, isolated. But do you think there's it's just because you're on holiday, you're on vacation, you're in a different place as opposed to your local neighbourhood? Do you think that's maybe why it's a little bit easier to just say hi and strike up a conversation with a complete stranger from a completely other part of the world?
I think that's true for some people for sure. Yeah. I think that, I just also want to say I know my neighbors, but there's also an intimacy that comes with that. So I know my neighbors, they see, they know things about me just because we live near one another, and so I think that can be really uncomfortable for people. And, even when maintain our rapport, I got to say hi to my neighbors, even when I'm really feeling like not talking to anybody or, whatever the case may be, right? Or when I'm frustrated with my dog, I still got to say hi to my neighbors, So, I think there's an intimacy that people can be really uncomfortable with because you got to see those people again and again and again. And I think when people are traveling, I think even though people will maybe be cautious and protective, it's also disarming in ways, because everything's new, it's exciting and it's affirming in so many ways. So I think people are just often in a better mood while traveling. And I think it's time bound, and so people know, all right, I'm going to be on the beach here for 2 days and I'm going to make best friends with this, the person who's serving me, food and beverages or, our taxi driver, we're going to have the same taxi driver for the whole time that we're here. So I do think that that's easier. And I also think that not every other country, but in so many other countries, human connection is much deeper and much more regular part of society, so you go to a lot of cultures where there's, all kinds of people out in public and everybody's talking to everybody. And the expectation or the cultural standard is that, people stick together, people support one another. And so that extends to the tourists who are there as well. And so I think that also makes it easier because, one is in this environment where this is just the standard. This is just how it happens. Right. And so, even for people who are reluctant at first, you can only be immersed in an environment or culture for so long and resist it, right? It takes so much more energy to resist a culture like that than it does just be like, oh, hey, let's connect, let's talk, all these things.
Yeah, I hear you on that. My friend Sam, who had mentioned earlier, actually, who's learned politics, etc. He turned 50 back in 2018. And we went to Scotland for his 50th, and it was just the two of us, we did a sort of 12, 13-day jaunt. So the first half was a whiskey tasting tour up in the Highlands of Scotland, which was awesome.
Yeah.
And then the second half was sightseeing. And what Sam loved, because he's born and bred Canadian and lived in Toronto for the majority of his life, works in Toronto. So it's a really busy city, obviously.
Yeah.
And people are generally heads down, getting to their business, place of work, etc. When we're in Scotland, when we'd go out for dinner on an evening, watch football on the TV, all the locals would invite us over and just say hi when you walked in the door, ask you, where you're from, how your day's been, what do you want to drink, here you should eat that and that. And he was blown away. He said, you would never ever get that in a downtown bar in Toronto, for example.
Yeah.
So just to your point on like a really simple level, it's a great example that you use there.
Yeah, thank you. And now, Danny, you're you're kind of stirring up my desire to travel. I had been like holding off for a little while. Now I'm like, it might be time to get back out in the world.
What's your ideal? Like, if you could choose your preferred vacation, is it like something that's busy and really full itinerary, or do you like to sort of just switch off, relax?
In my ideal travel, Danny, is I like to have a little bit of like, if we can get like a solid 2 weeks on a trip, then I want to spend 1 week in the city, and I want to spend probably about 5 days at the beach. I just, call it what you want. I love a beach, and, being by the ocean sometimes just feels so spiritual. And to, kind of slow down after having been in the city, going to the cultural sites, connecting with people, learning about things. And I've also, I've worked globally. And so having the meetings in the city, following that up with some quiet beach time. And maybe it's not always so quiet, but, being able to be in the natural beauty and have that like reflection and feel the connection to the ocean and to the people who are nearby. That's how I prefer to do it. Yeah.
I think I'd be a bit similar. Like I say, we moved from a big city to a really small village, and we're about a 15-minute walk from like a big lake. So you can go there, you can kayak and canoe, just swim, do whatever you want, basically. And I tend to find it in the summer especially, not so much in the winter, they're a lot harder to do, but in the summer, it's just nice if I've had like a really stressful day at work or whatever, just get out on the lake for an hour, and it just brings me right back down again.
Yeah.
It's so nice. So I'm with you 100% on that with the water side things.
Yeah, good.
Well, hopefully you'll get off to that very soon and get, and let me know how it went and where you went and what you got up to. That'd be awesome.
I will.
So we're almost at the end, and Emily, we've done well so far. Let's have a look then to see what question number 5 brings up. Okay,
what is it?
Question number 5. And this could go either way, because obviously because of your work, there may be, photos that you take for work. It may be nice and relaxing with your dog and Christmas, etc. But question number 5, Emily, what was the last picture you took on your phone?
Oh, that's interesting. Can I look?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Let me look.
I would never know what it was. I'd have to check anyway. So,
let me see here. What's the last picture I took on my phone? Oh, okay. It was, I have a dog and I have a cat. My cat is, she just turned 17 in human years in November. And my dog is 4. And so it's been, they weren't automatically friends. But just recently they have been, coming in closer proximity with one another. And so the most recent picture that I took is a picture of the 3 of us on just relaxing on the couch. My cat's on my lap, and then my dog is right next to me with his head very close to the cat. And so it's a sweet moment because when I got the dog, everyone was like, oh, the dog and the cat aren't going to get along, whatever. And I was just holding out. I was like, I'm just holding out for that day when I come home and they're actually cuddling, And so I think we're getting closer and closer to that moment. So I took a picture, and that was like really good for them to be so close. And it was also just sweet,
Well, and that's it, because obviously you've got the stereotypical dogs versus cats, and they're not, compatible. And you've had the cat longer, I guess.
Yeah. I've had her for 16 years, and she's 17.
Wow, yeah, 17, yeah. So I guess, I can understand. How long have you had your dog? You mentioned you got like a good sized dog, right?
Yeah, he's a big guy.
4? Yeah,
he's 4, and so I've had him for like 3.5 years.
Right. Yeah, so I can imagine that'd be a big. If the cat was the cat always just the only pet in the house prior to the dog?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can get the cat's point of view here because I'm very grumpy. I'm a grumpy Scotsman, Gen Xer. So I can get the cat's point of view. It's like, this is my zone. This is my time with Emily. Who are you? You know?
Right. Like, you're still here.
Yeah, exactly. I know we've got 3 little dogs. They're all the same breed. And we had one, we had 3 dogs prior, and our 2 boy dogs passed. They got old and passed. So we waited a while, then we got 2 other dogs. And there's mother and son, which is awesome. But the dog we had in the house with the 2 previous boy dogs took a while to adapt, you know, like it was her domain. She was used to 2 older boys, and now you've got like a lady dog that's younger than her, but it's a mom, and the puppy's like really rambunctious. So it was a big change, you know, for her.
And I think too, like for dogs especially, like, you know, they have little emotions. And so like, I think they also get a little jealous. Like, at least I know my dog does. I mean, that's part of the reason why he came on the couch, is because my cat came on, sat in my lap first. The next thing you know, here he is giving me those puppy dog eyes, asking to come up on the couch because he sees that the cat's getting attention. So I think for dogs too, it's like, you know, they're sensitive to that.
No, I know the girl dog that I mentioned, she growls if I'm petting. No, it doesn't seem like a nasty way, but it's like that jealousy that you mentioned, like the jealousy is like, you're talking to someone, you're petting someone else. I'm your dog, you know, pet me.
Right.
So and cats especially, cats are so independent, like, you know, don't mess with cats.
Right. Don't mess with cats. And I feel like my cat really helped me train the dog because, you know, the dog, you know, sometimes would maybe be like really rambunctious, running through the house, chasing a tennis ball. Next thing you know, here she comes around the corner with a paw, like just waiting for him, you know? And so he learned, you know, you don't just tear through the place. You got to slow down and then check the corners, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I've watched, one of my vices, if you like, is just like scrolling through a bunch of reels. I get sucked into like that vortex where you just go through reel after reel or short after short.
Right.
And I always get stuck on the videos where you've got cats that are taking revenge on dogs, you know, where dogs are playing, they're getting a bit close, whatever. And it's just like the super fast 10 swings of the arm really quickly. And like even big Dobermans and Alsatian stuff are just off, you know, this little cat is scared them away.
I know, right? Exactly. Because my dog he's an 80-pound German Shepherd mix. And my cat, I mean, she's actually pretty little. You know, she's, you know, on a good day, she's 9 pounds. But she's not scared of that guy. I'll tell you that. But the other way around, yes.
You should get like a little camera installed, like one of these indoor security cameras, and just see what they get up to. They're probably just having the best day of their life while you're at work or out, you know, and then it's only when you come up the driveway and up the pathway, etc. They'll get back to, you know, okay, just let's get back to who we are.
Right. Yeah, she's here.
Exactly. Well, that is awesome. And I think it's a nice way to finish off your time in the random question hot seat, Alice. I do appreciate that.
Yeah.
As is only fair, because I've had you, you know, on the pressure point, if you like, of the hot seat. As is only fair, it's now time to hand over the question master baton to yourself.
Okay. All right, Danny. Okay. So my question for you is, as a result of doing all of these interviews with people, have you noticed that there's something that everyone has in common, like similarities, or like what have you noticed about like people in this kind of experience with these random questions with an interviewer, you know?
That's a really good question. I think one of the common threads is you're all silly enough to come on the show and put yourself in the hot seat. I'm joking there. No, I think it's been really refreshing to see how open people are. Because generally, and you've got your own podcast, Emily, and you've been on, you know, countless interviews. You know yourself, sometimes, as much as we don't want to, we try to present the best version of ourselves, whether that's on social, speaking to each other on a podcast, whatever that looks like. And you may come in with, you know, I've done it myself, I've been guilty of myself, coming in with prepared sort of, if I get asked this is going to be my soundbite moment where I can say this, for example. And I feel because of the format of the show, guests come in to know that I'm not trying to have a gotcha moment with you. So, you know, I want to make sure, we were talking earlier about, you know, comfort zones, etc. I want to make sure you're comfortable. And I think that's the guests that come on, because they know the format and they know that it's going to be completely random. I think every guest I feel is probably a good, open-minded, person that doesn't mind being vulnerable. We shared a vulnerable moment of your own earlier. So it's been nice to just speak to people and have a conversation that hopefully, if we were to bump into each other on vacation, for example, stuff like this would happen. So yeah, I feel that the most common thread is an openness to see where a conversation goes and go with that flow, as opposed to trying to make it structured and X, Y, Z. And so far, everybody's been super nice and super easy to chat with, like your good self, which helps me and makes my job a lot easier. So thank you for that. And I feel that does that answer? Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, that's good. That's great. Thank you. Seems like a fun, role that you have, okay, random questions, random answers. What are people going to say,
Well, and that's it. And it can be a little bit tough at times because if the question doesn't equate to an answer that's maybe 1 minute long, I think, well, do I follow up and go another direction with that question, or do I just say, let's call it a day on that question, let's go to the next one? So it can be fun trying to keep the conversation going, but for the most part, it's really, really super enjoyable when I get to meet awesome folks like yourself and just basically have a conversation about 5 or 6, I guess, really cool random things. So
yeah. Okay, exciting. Well, I'm excited for you to keep this work up, and
thank
you. Yeah. And I'll say for me too, it's nice to be out of kind of the structured environment, of what are my talking points, what do we got to say now, so.
No, I can imagine, and especially for the work you do, Emily, I can imagine sometimes. I mean, I'm not sure, but maybe sometimes, depending on political bias, slants, etc., some interviewers may be trying to put you down a rabbit hole that you don't necessarily want to be going, but their question in line might try to place you there. So yeah, that's right. One of the reasons I try to keep, political bias out of the show completely, and just have a nice conversation. Obviously, it's important to speak about policies and, stuff like that for sure.
Right.
But yeah, I would love to do a live show sometime. Just get the audience to actually ask the questions, because then it's really random. So it'd be cool.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah, a live recording. And, funnily enough, I actually really enjoy asking kind of random questions. And I grew up playing 20 questions with my mom, and so it's a fun thing to do. And I think we need things that are just purely entertainment and lighthearted and fun, but it also actually really does help with critical thinking skills,
Yep. Oh yeah, I can 100% agree on that for sure. So Emily, as I mentioned, and thank you again for that question, I have really enjoyed chatting with you today. For people that want to A, listen to your award-winning podcast, B, find out more about the work that you do, and C, even talk to you about, working with you, where's the best place to check all that stuff out, connect with you, etc.?
Yeah. Well, to connect with me directly, people should go to LinkedIn and search for Emily R. Williams, Chicago. I will come up. And to listen to the podcast, it is Beyond Voting, everywhere you stream podcasts.
That is awesome. And as always, I will leave the links to that in the show notes. So whatever app you're listening on, or if you're listening to this on the website, just check out the episode show notes, and that will link through to Emily's LinkedIn as well as her podcast and website. So all the stuff will be in there in the show notes. So make sure you check them out. So again, Emily, thanks for appearing on today's 5 random questions.
Yes. Thank you so much, Danny.
Thanks for listening to 5 random questions. And if this was your first time here, feel free to hit follow and check out past episodes. If you enjoyed this week's episode, I'd love for you to leave a review on the app you're currently listening on, or if you know someone else that would enjoy the show, be sure to send them this way. It's very much appreciated. Until the next time, keep asking those questions.